Okay, Bismillah. Start the backup recording.
Is is Omar's note taker a person or AI?
No,
Now I'm
it's
scared.
no, it's not. It's not a person. It's it's an AI tool service that I just started that I'm just testing out. But it worked pretty well for the last session. I took a transcript from that session and and I recorded and I like summarized that using AI. Um, so it worked pretty well. I think the only trouble is it's made for English, obviously. So we speak a little bit of Arabic in there, and sometimes it throws it off. So if you know if you're referencing something, just keep it in mind. Just keep in mind to like say the translation, just so we catch everything in the notes, inshallah. Okay,
Well,
so
I completely relate to the note taker, actually.
what's that?
I relate to the note taker. I also need translation with every word in Arabic.
uh, yeah, some services are pretty good. They catch like at least some things like Bismillah and stuff like that, and others just make up complete random things that make absolutely no sense. So, um, yeah, we'll see, inshallah. Okay, he's talking now. Interesting. Okay.
Oh, it's actually low-key creepy. Am I the only one?
I think you
I
can
feel like
even.
I'm being
I think
watched.
you can even ask it questions. Oh yeah, you can follow. Yeah, you can click on that link if you want and follow the transcript. Um, yeah, yeah. I'm not sure how it works yet, but we'll see. Okay, Bismillah. So this is the 10th session, I think, or maybe the 11th. I think it's the 11th actually. And because it's Eid, we're going to switch things up a little bit. Do I think we can do two names? I think we can still do البارئ, right, which is what we were supposed to do, but we can also include in al-mu'id because I think it's fitting in a lot of different ways. Obviously, because it's Eid and the root name is the root word for Eid and Mu'id is the same. But also because it relates to I think the conversation that we've been having for the past, I guess it would be a week now since we started talking about since last session we talked about Khaliq, al Khaliq, the creator, and we talked a bit about I think the way I like to think about it, and I'm still kind of processing it and thinking about it, and that's like the creativity of authoring yourself or creating yourself, or the creativity of having good character. You know, leaning on that relationship between khuluq, good character, and khalq, which is our makeup or uh, our created beings. So I think, yeah, mu'id, the idea of, I guess the returner maybe is the simplest translation there, or the one who returns things. I think they're related. Does that sound good with everyone? Should we stick to one, or we can do both? I think, and then I think we can even bring this name back. I mean, like I try to do at the beginning of each of these sessions is kind of reiterate our intentions with it, and my intention is very experimental, very flexible. So everything has a heart is kind of the basic premise of my research and these sessions. So you can really connect anything, everything, especially in language, is connected through sound and form. So we can, you can, maybe you watched a movie last night that had spoke to you in some way, and revealed some aspect of a name of Allah, or an idea. Everything has etymology to it. Is kind of the idea. Um, so yeah, I think weaving in both is should be no problem. So I think the translation that we have for al-bari is the originator here, the root being ba, ra, and hamza. And then al-mu'id, let's see if we can find it here. It's probably going to be too difficult in English. So mu'id is going to be towards the end, so we're jumping a lot, and there it is, right after al-mubdi' and mu'id. And the reason I kind of want to also touch on al-bari is, like I said, we've kind of been having this conversation already about the creator. And if you look at the notes that we have actually for the last session, there was something that we mentioned really briefly, but the three names al-khaliq, al-bari, al-musawwir are all kind of related in a way. They all can kind of be translated as the creator. Yeah. So for al-bari, we have the same form that we came across last week. So nothing really new there. Active participle form, active doer form, not an intensive form, which is, I'm not exactly sure. I can probably do some quick research after the session, but I think it looks like maybe close to half and half. Half of the 99 names have the simple active participle form, and then the other half have the intensive, the common intensive form, which is fa'al, with the doubling of that middle sound. So it looks like it's almost 50-50. You can see some here, like al-ba'ith. And we did al-khaliq last week, and then today's al-bari'. So again, the same morphological form of active participle. Al-mu'id is also a form that we have done, or we've come across before. Anybody want to take a shot at what the other name was that has the same exact form as al-mu'id?
I'm not sure. Was it another one, al-mu'in?
Sorry, what is it?
Oh, is it al-mu'min?
Yes, al-mu'min, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a morphology geek. I love morphology, so yeah, no pressure with the random morphology questions, but it helps, I think, to think of other words that have the same form to kind of get used to the sounds and the patterns. Yeah, so mu'min is the same pattern of muf'il, active participle form again, non-intensive, but as you can see, we're adding a letter. So when we did mu'min, the root was hamza, mim, and noon. Where is it? So mu'min, right? Amana. That's the base root. And then we add that muf'il, that mim in the beginning, to make it a active participle that also has the connotation of like causality, causation, or also instrumentality. So we talked about that a little bit when we talked about mu'min, God, Allah being described as an active participle with the concept of causality and instrumentality in the semantic field of faith and safety. Right? So God is the believer, or the one who believes in us more than anybody else, or to the maximum level. So then with mu'id, the base verb is to return, and we're taking that active participle form again with the causality, instrumentality, mim in the beginning, and we get mu'id. So the one who, we didn't look at the translation that was here, but like I said, let's see what the translation is here. The restorer, the reinstater, restarter is kind of an interesting way to think about it as well. Yeah, any thoughts or questions on the morphological form before we jump into some more abstract stuff?
Yeah, I had a question. So all like mobile phones imply causation?
So it's, yeah, I would say so. I mean, at that level of like abstraction, it's kind of a little bit arbitrary to me. Or like, what's the difference between causality and instrumentality? It's a little bit. Maybe we could put it another way. So like, you have madrasa, right, which comes from the root for teach, for learning, right, and we use that causative form to indicate a school, um, madrasa, right? But if you say like mastara, right, that comes from the root for forming a line. Satr is a line, right, and mastara is a ruler. So it has that idea of an instrument. Fath is another one. So you have fataha, it means to open, and then you say muftah. There's a u vowel in the beginning instead of a vowel, but same idea, right? Of a key being, what's the difference there? Is the key causing the opening, or is the key the instrumentation of opening? It's it's a bit abstract, but at some level I think they're the same thing. But at another level, I think the difference is I mean, it's obviously useful in practical language, right? Because we denote things as tools and we don't denote things as places. So like a place is like a kind of like a, it's easier to think of a place, like a physical place, as like a cause, right? Like a school is like a cause of learning, and then objects, I guess we kind of think of as tools. But yeah, at some level of abstraction, I think they're kind of the same thing. Like Allah is the instrument and the cause of our faith, of our daily lives, of of everything that happens. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it for that's all we really need to say about the form. So like I said, with al-bari', general idea is creation. We can jump into a little bit more of some of the nuance and the different words that we get in that root. But does anybody want to start off with any thoughts on al-mu'id? So, the basic idea being related obviously to the days that we are in right now, Eid, days of celebration. But the base form, the base idea in this root is the idea of returning. So, we call Eid return. We call Eid Eid, right, which has the sense of that which returns annually, or that which is, cyclical in some way. So that's why we call Eid Eid, or that's why it comes from that root. Can expand here and see if there's anything that catches our eye.
So the translation I found is the restorer.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like I said, the base meaning is to return. So.
But I think it's interesting because I don't know. So all the names I found online, I found on an Instagram post. So I don't know if the translation is good or not. But the idea of restoring would imply that something was taken. So.
Yeah, I think the base meaning actually also in al-bari' has a similar kind of sense to it, of somebody healing, right? So also similar to Jabbar, right? But it's somebody who returned to health after sickness. So that's one of the ideas in al-bari'. So great calls, Nira, for doing Mu'aid, because they're almost identical in many ways, al-bari' and al-mu'id. Um,
I had like a thought.
Sorry, what was that? We can barely hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, so it's a little low, but we can hear you.
How about now? But
Yeah,
now I can't. The
yeah,
heck.
yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, now I can hear everything. Okay, cool. Yeah, I had a thought. Um, so the concept of return, like the word return, is like interesting. It's making me smile because you know how we go through like different states in our iman, and like we, you know, we'll cycle and like we'll hit like a low point, and then like there'll be like spiritual lethargy, or it just gets harder for like a little while. Then like, you know, like you increase your effort, and then like it gets easier again and stuff. And it's I when I first um came back to the Deen, and I was like becoming properly practicing and everything, and I hit my first low. I was so confused because I didn't know this whole like thing. So I was like, well, like, you know, that was fun while it lasted. What's happening? Like, I don't, you know, I just thought that like that like it was being taken away again, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. But then I was scrolling, and in those days I would see, I would pray for something specific or ask for something specific, and then I would receive answers like right away, and usually through like my Instagram algorithm. So I was scrolling on Instagram, and I saw this post, and it was like, Allah is not the one, like he's like, it was talking about Allah's mercy and love, and like, you know, how he's the creator and stuff, and so he doesn't move. So it's like if you feel distant from Allah, then who moved? And it's like, so the thing of like return makes me smile because it's like, in a way, like one can think about it as like the one who returns, and I was thinking about it in the context of atawab, but then I realized it's also like the person who makes, like who causes the return. And so like seeing some of the roots here, like sick person and restoration and everything, so it's like you kind of fall into like some kind of funk, or you get like sick spiritually or like whatever, and then he's the one who causes that return, and he reinstates like your station with him, and he restores you to like a better state. So that was just like a quick thought that came to my mind.
Yeah, yeah. I think you can think of it in a lot of different ways. Um, I think the base idea of Allah is the one. I actually kind of like to think of it the way, you know, somebody mentioned, I think a couple of days ago, and also in like some of maybe the Sufi path of knowledge, and I think it's been mentioned a few times about how like Allah recreates, you know, reality every moment. كل يوم هو في شأن. Every moment or every day, he is in some kind of um, work or some kind of station, doing something of some sort. I think you can take that sense from Mu'id. Um, I think also the way I kind of connect it is, you know, with the names that we've been discussing, Al Khaliq and Al Bari and Al Musawwir, right? The different facets of creation, right? Different framings of creating. Um, you know, maybe one in like a very neutral, kind of very physical or very um, down to earth kind of sense, and then Bari having more of a connotation of like, to me, uh, actually my favorite translation for that name is the evolver. It's often translated as the creator or the fashioner, but I prefer creator for khaliq, and I prefer fashioner for al-musawwir. So I think evolver um, has a cool connotation, right? Because it has this idea of kind of blending. You know, what I like to do is, you know, blend east and west. So it kind of has this, you know, touches on the idea of evolution, right? Which is a very Western, agnostic kind of idea. But you know, personally, in myself, I've never found any kind of contradiction or you know, opposition between a creator and evolution, right? Because evolution is just kind of like the blueprint that the creator uses, right? It's just kind of like the plan that he comes up with. So I think that ties into al-Mu'id. what I think of when I think of Al-Mu'id usually is the ayah in Surah Al-Buruj, which is a beautiful surah for a lot of different reasons, especially, I think, in a literary sense, because there's a lot of things that happen from like a literary perspective in that surah that are like very unique to the Quran, very unique to any kind of literature or writing. There's a kind of like boasting or like pride that Allah takes in His own speech in that surah, right? In like in the way that He kind of can speak however He wants, right? There's that kind of sense like in that surah that I get. And one of the ayahs in that surah is فَعَالٌ لِمَا يُرِيد, right? The intensive doer of whatever He wishes. And then another one is إِنَّهُ يُبْدِئُ وَيُعِيد. So indeed He begins and He restarts. Yu'id, right? Same root as al-mu'id. So it's always kind of, it's a little bit jarring even, or a little curious, because I feel like human logic and thinking would lead you to the conclusion of He's saying, oh, He starts and He ends, right? Like you would expect that, right? He's the one who begins and then He's the one who ends. But He doesn't say that, right? He says, I'm indeed Allah is the one who, indeed He is the one who begins and restarts, right? Or returns. I always think of that. And I think that's kind of related to creation, because creation in many ways is like cyclical, right? It's like repeated, right? It's in everything from like cell division to the formation of galaxies, the fractal nature of the universe, which I love to say. But it's this idea that things are often repeated in nature, right? That's just how nature works, right? It's just like, you cell division is basically like, repeating the same structure over and over again, right? There's a little bit of change, a little bit of diversity. Procreation, humans and animals reproducing themselves, plants reproducing themselves. That's all a kind of repetition, right? That keeps happening. So that's kind of how I was thinking of it. We see here even what Lane has here. Not sure if anybody noticed it, but under the base entry for Al-Mu'id, before he mentions, as a signification for God, is it's used for a stallion camel. I'm not sure what is meant by one that is covered repeatedly. I think that has something to do with like procreation, or he's really fast, or like a really good camel that's effective.
Yeah, no, covered is the technical term for breeding like horses and stuff like when a stud is introduced to females, it's like this stud is like covered, this many females. So yes, it is for procreation.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know too much about that sort of life, but it seems like normally a camel or a steed or whoever would need assistance in like procreating, but mu'id is a term that's used for a camel that doesn't need any help doing so. He's ready to go all on his own. And then also, another signification that we have here is just a man that's acquainted with affairs, someone who's experienced, possessing the skill to do something, or someone is able, or efficient at doing something, or acquainted with doing something because he's habituated to doing it. He's accustomed to doing it. So you get that sense there as well with Mu'id.
Or someone that has something innately inside of them, so they don't, like you said, like it doesn't require assistance because there's like this capacity and this like activation energy that's like ready and readily available all the time.
Yeah. I mean, connecting it back to, I think we can jump to Al-Bar and look a little bit closer there, but connecting it back to creation. and fashioning. Yeah, I mean, Allah is obviously the best of creators, and in His creation is, you know, the same kind of blueprint, over and over again. Yeah, it has diversity, and it can change, but Allah's creation is perfect in so many ways. So makes sense that the same structures, the same patterns, the same ideas get repeated again. Um, I think it's also.
And something to add on that point.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so just like on the point of like creation and how this actually, I thought it was actually not a great call to do this because we need to also do the. I feel like understanding this name kind of depends on understanding the name before it, Mubti, which obviously was gift thanks to me. But yeah, it says وَهُوَ الَّذِي يَبْدَأُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُهُ. And that's like, the thing about what you said about cyclical creation, but also about like annihilation. I love this. It says here, هو الذي يبدأ الخلق من غير أصل فينشئه ويوجده بعد أن لم يكن شيئا ثم يفنيه بعد ذلك ثم يعيده كما بدأه بعد فنائه وهو أهون عليه. So it's like he creates it without, mubdi is like creating it out of nothing, without a root, and then creating it, and then after ثم يفنيه بعد ذلك, then it gives it like fana, I guess, annihilates it and then restores it. So like there's this like, oh, like I can create from scratch, which is like, also an idea of in al-Khaliq, right? But then there's like, and then I can turn it back to nothing. And then a mubdi is like, oh, I can recreate it from fana. So it's like what you said about like it's really jarring. SubhanAllah, I like totally get that. Because those ayat about like fa'alu lima yurid, it's like saying that Allah is the doer, and then He's the causer of the beginning or the creating and the recreating, which means like it's just showing this like really like I don't, how do I put it, like really present, like Allah's hand is in terms of doership and causation is so present, like it's so like how do you say it? Like it's so like I don't know, it's just like interwoven into reality that everything is being done by God, and then it's being created by God, and then recreated by God. And then I also like the word this name Al Mu'id in terms of like bringing hope, because it's like if you ever feel like you had something once, or like a dua was answered, but then it's such like you can't have it again, or it's like it left, or it was taken away, then like this name gives hope that actually Allah can create it again and return it. If it's a person, right? They can return it again, and He can return it again, or them again. It says in Al-Qasas, إِنَّ الَّذِي فَرَضَ عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ لَرَادُّكَ إِلَى الْمَعَادِ. That's so beautiful. So yeah, that God is the one that can return you to the ma'ad, the place of return. And I guess here in the commentary it says that it's the place, like Allah is reassuring Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that He's going to return him to Makkah, which is again like it's like this reassurance of like someone's in exile or something, or they're away from like I don't know wherever they want to be. Then that's okay. Like that can be done again. Like if it's done once, it can be done again, even if it's like annihilated or like it looks like it's annihilated. And then the other one is that this name is also linked to Al-Haq, which is the name that the Shaykh Al-Akbar uses to refer to God, by the way, as like a proper name. He usually says Qala Al-Haq instead of saying like Qala Allah. So it says قُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَمَا يُبْدِئُ الْبَاطِلُ وَمَا يُعِيدُ. So Mubti and Mu'id are like names of linked to Allah being the reality, and like reminding us that actually it's the real, which is God, or Haq. That is the one that has the power to create and to recreate. And Batil does not have the power to create or to recreate. And like evil, Batil is also evil, right? But Batil is also something that does not have an ontological reality. That's why like it's in opposition to haq, like haq versus batil, like real versus unreal, but also good versus evil. So like evil is unreal, but when we see evil, we think it's so powerful. But Allah is saying actually it does not have the power to create or to recreate. Only haq has the power to do that. And then when it comes to bari, the name, the sense that it evokes in me is like a sense of innocence. Um, like there's several types of innocence that it like evokes in me. There's like, the original purity, the innocence of a child, but also like innocence as in legal innocence. In Urdu, we have this, we say in like legal terms, ba izzat bari karna, which means to, I actually don't know how to say that thing. But anyway, but basically it's like let go, like to basically declare someone innocent, right? I forgot the legal term in English. But yeah, it's like when the court decides that this person didn't commit whatever they were accused of committing. So there's that. There's also like ritual innocence or like moral innocence. Like Yusuf alayhi salam says that, when the Imra'at Aziz, the Aziz's wife, was trying to seduce him, that he says, وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي. I wasn't, like, I guess I cannot declare myself innocent except for what Allah had rahmah on me. And then there's also like when it comes to bari, and bari, it's like Ibrahim alayhi salam says, "Ana bari mimma." I think it says mimma yaf'alun or "Ana bari minkum."
Yeah, I think so.
So that's like letting go of the responsibility of others and their actions and being like, no, I'm actually not going to take that on myself. But yeah, that's a lot already.
Yeah, thank you for that. Something slipped my mind while you were talking, but I guess one obvious idea that we didn't state yet, which you kind of implied, is that al-Mu'eed, the restarter or the reinstater or the restorer, um, kind of points to the ultimate return, right? The root there is to return, and we're all going to return to Allah, right? I think one of the words you mentioned was
Right. Actually,
ma'ad.
in the yeah, so in the tafsir of that it says one of the meanings of it is it could either be Makkah or it could be Qiyamah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think both apply. Um, even in the same simple sense of like, repentance, right? In Arabic is literally to return, right? Literally to turn back towards Allah, right? So, um, and like we've discussed in previous sessions and with other ideas, even our own will is something ultimately that Allah controls. Like if we want to turn back to Him, that's something that Allah blesses us with. If we want to if we want to ask for forgiveness, that's something that Allah places in our hearts, right? So I think all those senses of returning all apply. Um, and of course, obviously, the day that we all return, the day that everything returns to the way it was, is also implied, I think, in this name as well. Um, I guess this is a little bit of a. Maybe this is actually the better way to kind of do the anagram stuff. But there's an interesting anagram that comes to mind right away if you jumble up the letters. Does anybody else, anyone else see it? Kind of just pops out at me, I think, in terms of the context of a return, right? And a fated return, that we will all return. That we all return to God. So if you flip the first two letters, right, you get wa'd, which is promise. So I thought that was kind of the anagrams are still uncharted territory that drive some people crazy because kind of just diluting time and logic and order in order to make connections between words at that level of linguistic structure or cognitive capacity, whatever, however you want to think of it. But wa'd, yeah, if you flip the first two letters, you get wa'd, which is promise, which I think is very clearly related to the idea of returning or the ultimate return, because that's God's promise, right? God's promise is that you will return and you will face your Lord. There was something else. I think sick person was something else that kind of came to me. I just realized it, like, even in colloquial Arabic, we use this root to describe somebody who got sick, Um, I think the idea is like, um, I think the idea is generally that something returned to something, like a sickness returned to somebody. I'm not sure. I might have to look into that a little bit more. I wonder if there's another word
Can
here.
I ask?
It might just be a colloquial kind of thing. But yeah, feel free to ask anything.
So the words on the red dot, so they all in Arabic, they're all translated the same. I mean, they all have mued,
Um,
or they have like different.
are you saying so? All of these red dots are all different shades.
Yeah.
They all share these three letters. That's essentially what
Okay, so they have the same root.
yeah, they all share the same root. Yeah. The translation is not that great sometimes, but sometimes it helps to kind of like see some things that don't stand out as much in Arabic. Um,
So I know, like, from my Arabic classes that when you make a word from its root, you kind of use the rule of the file, if I'm not mistaken. There are like three words, and then you just, like, if you want to make the doer, you have to put like M and uh, Hamza or Kesra, if I'm not mistaken. I'm still confusing them. And
uh,
if you want to do like the doer or the object, you kind of change the. So my question was, when they say, when these words, which are fairly different, for example, excellent she camel is different from habit or from benefit or from return. So I imagine they have like different letters but the same root. Do Does it mean anything? I mean, is it there like a rule, and which you can like learn, and then you know these words, or you just have to learn them by heart? And
yeah, no,
I guess
there's definitely patterns for sure. There's definitely patterns. um, the goal of this app is not necessarily language learning, but like I do want to improve it so that it does kind of help you learn languages. So like one of the features that I'm hoping to add soon is like you can click on a word, and not just see the definition, but you can see the form of the word, and then you can see other words that have the same form. So mu'id follows the same pattern as mu'min, as we said. The only thing, like, often you can just hear it, but if there's a vowel in the root, that's what complicates things, and that's what makes things a little bit irregular. Um, but um, but yeah, and did you have a specific question about like a specific pattern, or you're just wondering in general? In general, like how the form augments or changes the meaning?
I all the questions, but so any question you could possibly think, I have it. But so I was just like wondering, like the she camel, for example, how come is it's in the same family root with honest? I think it was honest somewhere over there, or the restorer of the returner of the. I mean, if there's like
Yeah. So
a link.
yeah. So um the the way that okay, I mean, so we kind of went over this a little bit. So the name of Allah, Al-Mu'id, right? If you take away the article, it's just a word that is used in different contexts. And one of the contexts that it's used is a stallion camel, right? And the reason for that is because it has the same meaning, of one who returns or one who does something repeatedly, over and over again. So in the context of God, we talked about that in a lot of different ways. In the context of a she camel, it's just a camel that's really good at procreating. That's all it is, right? So it's because it's because the Arabs, or the Bedouins, or whoever, they link things in. I mean, every language has. It's not just Arab, but like we link things kind of metaphorically, right? That's why I believe that language is like the best window into the human psyche and the human mind, and into how we learn, because it preserves these things, right? It preserves how human beings developed their thinking over the course of time. So does that answer your question? The reason that she camel is here is because it's used for a camel that repeatedly procreates, that has repeatedly procreates, and he's really good at it, or he's effective at doing it. So that's why that's there. But you see all these kind of things all the time. Well, my favorite one that comes to mind actually is from the root for sun, which is Shems, right? So the sun is Shems, and one of the words that we get from that, I shared this in the group before, is shamus, and that's a word that is used to describe a horse that can't be ridden, right? He's just too wild. He's too proud, and he doesn't want anyone to ride him. So I mean, the connection is kind of shows you a little bit about how the Arab mind works, and the sun is at the top, right? It's all by itself. It's number one. It's everyone sees it. No one can touch it, right? And that's why they called the horse, the wild horse that couldn't be ridden, shamus. They take it from that the same root. So does that answer the question a little bit, I think?
Yeah, no, that definitely. I think it's so interesting. Thank you. Like, that's really interesting. And the fact that we can go from this name of Allah and then just like pick the most random word in this scheme that you made, and just what's the connection between the she camel? Yeah, because it restores life every year, or I don't know how often camels procreate. But yeah, I think it's really...
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely think of it that way as well. Um, the reason that I kind of came up with this graph, or knowledge graph, or there's a lot of different reasons from a technical perspective, but like for me, I kind of see all of these dots as like points in a semantic field or space, right? And it's just our limited perception cannot put all these things together in one container, so we have individual dots and words for it, but really it's all just one thing. That's how I think of it, right? Like this is a semantic field of different ideas, but really it's just one idea. I mean, that's kind of how I think of cognition and learning in the mind, and embodied cognition specifically. So I mean, it's the beauty of the Arabic language that kind of gives us a window into the mind that way. But
I think sorry, continue. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say this is a bit of a stretch, but it also reminds me a little bit of, like, I don't know if you remember from science classes when you were younger, like the structure of an atom, right? So you have like an atom has like a protons and neutrons in the middle, or whatever, and then it has like electrons surrounding it, right? But years later we kind of realized that there's no such thing as an electron, right? Like these little dots that we thought we saw, at some level of magnification, they were just limitations of our tools and our perception. Really, if you look a little bit into the science, it's more like a cloud of like energy, right? And like, it becomes activated or concentrated in certain moments or in certain areas, and that's really what electrons. That's really that's really what we saw that we called electrons. So I feel like in a lot of ways, language and meaning is kind of the same, right? Like there's this really general idea that our brains are too small to kind of fathom, so we see these little instances of it, right? We see these little points in semantic space that kind of stand out at us. Anything else we want to say on on this route. I think we can.
I want to say something.
Oh,
It's
please.
just, I don't know if you get that. Yeah. First of all, wow, like that unlocked some trauma because, like, I was like, they made us study all this stuff about electrons and their like orbits and orbitals, and then you reach like, I don't know, high school, and they're like, that wasn't even real. It's just probabilities.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, why did you lie to me this whole time? Like, and like, I don't understand like why they're still teaching that if we found out that there's no orbits and there's just probabilities. Like, what's the point of putting the kids through that? Anyway, um, so yeah, I was just looking at the corpus for Ada Yaud, right? And it says like what you said about like creation being cyclical. It says منها خلقناكم وفيها نعيدكم ومنها نخرجكم تارة أخرى. From the earth we created you, and into it we will return you, and from it we will extract you another time. I feel like there's just this like sense of like death that's very present, with the Mubdi and Mu'id, and that's very obvious here as well. It's like, oh, like I can create from scratch and I can bring you back to scratch and then I can recreate you again. Like, dust is kind of like, or the earth or but actually dust, right? It's like this nothingness. You don't really see it as life, like you see it as death. But then God is like, actually, I can create life from that. And then I can bring that back to nothingness and then I can, recreate it. It's just like subhanAllah. There's also the returning to, this one's a bit very Jalali. Let's see. كلما أرادوا أن يخرجوا منها من غم أعيدوا فيها وذوقوا عذاب الحريق. Every time they want to get out of hellfire from anguish, they will be returned to it, and it will be said, taste the punishment of the burning fire. Subhanallah. Then there is, there's this one. فسيقولون من يعيدنا قل الذي فطركم أول مرة. They say, who will restore us? Say, he who brought you forth the first time. So there's again like Fatir is also one of the names that's like hinted at.
Falter, you said? Oh, I think we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just looking something up. 1 second.
Yeah, I mean much of what you said reminded me of, a common metaphor that you hear in the Quran of like, Allah is the one who brings life from death, and He returns life after death, and that's often a metaphor that's even like explicitly mentioned, in the Quran is like, the Quran is like the water that comes down to the earth and gives it life after its death. So the Word of God, the Quran is that which is like water for our hearts. It comes down and brings our hearts back to life.
Right, subhanAllah. So there's the other one, and I feel like this touches on like what I was talking about last class about like annihilation and like how the universe is recreated every moment, and about how Al-Ghazali talks about like miracles, and even the Shaykh Al-Akbar Ibn al-Arabi talks about like how these are actually not, they're only miracles because we don't understand that everything is being recreated like in like constantly, right? So like anything that's white is being recreated constantly as white. But then if God recreates it as black, then suddenly we think, oh, that's a miracle. But actually, it's just, God just did the same exact thing that he was doing, but instead of doing it in a way that we expect, he did it in a way that we don't expect. But it says here, and I feel like that's also a manifestation of al-Mu'id and like miracles. And it says, قال خذها ولا تخف سنعيدها سيرتها الأولى. When like Musa alayhi salam's stick Allah turned it into a stick, and he was terrified, and Allah said, seize it and fear not, we will return it to its former condition. So it's like God turning the stick into a snake, like that's a miracle, but actually in reality, God not turning it into a snake, like that's also a miracle because he's actually recreating it as a snake, stick in every moment. But it's just because it was unexpected that a stick would become a snake. Like that's why it seems like a miracle to us.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. it's in a lot of ways it's very mystical to me, and I don't really know how to engage with it. But in a lot of ways, it's also very like objective and scientific almost, because I think what it alludes to, and I think you know Ibn Arabi and other mystical thinkers also kind of lead me in this direction as well. And it's, I think what they're observing is the inherent limitation of human perception. Um, I think that's that's kind of how I think about it. Is that like it reminds me of like some silly arguments as well that come up in philosophy, right? Like the brain in the vat idea, right? Like there's no way of knowing that you're not just like a brain in someone's laboratory, or like there's no way of knowing that you're not in some kind of like matrix system, right? Where someone is just the reality that you perceive is just someone's programming. They're just making you feel all these different things. And those are kind of like fundamental problems in epistemology and philosophy that are in a lot of ways silly, but in a lot of ways important, if that makes sense. Because I think they're silly in that, like that if you think about them forever, or too much, you can't do anything, right? Like you can't function on those premises, right? That like everything is an illusion, right? Sure, perception is an illusion, but if you dwell on that forever, then you won't accomplish anything. You won't be able to move. But it's also important in the sense that it's one of those things that when you think about, I think immediately clues you in as to there being a creator, there being more to life than what we can see. Um, yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly like what Ibn Arabi specifically gets at when he's talking about like creation and recreation, because he hints that, I mean, he doesn't hint, he basically says it's kind of like frames, right? Like frames in a film roll. And like each frame is brand new, but it looks like, for instance, if a person is moving or walking, it looks like the person is walking. It looks like, for instance, me, like I'm speaking. But like even like the, what's it called, phones from my vocal cords, or like let's just say my vocal cords are moving or vibrating, but in reality, they're not vibrating. Like God is recreating them anew every moment. It's just my, like you said, lack of perception that makes us feel like there is a flow, but there is no flow because there is constant annihilation in every moment because only God can be baqi, uh, you know, كل شيء هالك إلا وجهه, right? Like, but there's something else as well. كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. So like everything is fanny. So then necessarily it has to get
Everything is,
annihilated.
sorry, just for the transcript, everything is fan, meaning everything is ephemeral, everything is annihilating, everything is dying, and then also being brought back to life.
Yeah, and so then there's also like this sort of paradox of like إنه لميت وإنكم لميتون. He will die and you will die, but it also means like you are dead. So it's like we're actually dead and alive, like like we're constantly dying and being recreated. But then, so the thing that he talks about is about how like because everything is being recreated, but we don't perceive it. That's what like creates the illusion of motion, and that is what creates the illusion of time, of linear time. So he is saying that there is no such thing as linear time, and that is just like a shortcoming in our perception, a limitation of our perception of the constant annihilation and constant recreation that makes us assume that there is such a thing as linear time.
Yeah, exactly. This is a really important subject for me, but in a very formal way. So I don't talk about it too much because I think it's the bridge between the East and the West that I always am chasing. It's the gap between science and faith. And put simply, it's just the stance of humility and curiosity that we must adopt, both as Muslims, as believers in God, but also as intellectuals, also as scientists, also as researchers, because to just be stuck in scientism or empiricism, and thinking that, like, oh, if it can't be measured, if it can't be quantified, then it's not worth talking about. I don't think that's an attitude of humility or um, curiosity, and that's where humanity began. So if we forget those roots, then I think we're truly we're truly lost. But yeah, perception is limited, um, and just to kind of tie it back to these sessions and the research and the work that I've been kind of doing for a while, is that perception is not just simply limited, but it's structured, right? It's layered, um, and so is reality. So studying language, studying reality, kind of clues us into the layers of ourselves, clues us into the structure of our perception, where exactly we are limited, and where we can be keen and insightful. um,
Can
so,
I?
yeah, please.
So I was thinking of what Zinira said about annihilation, and it made me think of fun, as in art. And so she gave the example of the vocal cords vibrating, and how they are, if I understood correctly, recreated every moment. It's a very interesting concept, but at the same time, I was thinking, so like when there's a very good painting like made with where spirit also was involved in the process of making it, and so it was made with heart and with presence and everything. So you make the painting once, and then and this is somehow meant to be a parallel to the vibrating chords example. You make the painting once, and then every time you come across it again, it your perception of it, like, it changes. The painting changes every time. That's like one of the pillars of good art anyway. And so I was thinking that it could be perpetual recreation every second, but it can also be like, this is something that art has, it's done once, but with all the spirit and all the presence of the moment that's needed to make a proper piece of art. And then it has life itself. It has somehow given through your perception, and each time you witness it, it feels like something changes in it, and the way you relate to it changes, and somehow it's everything blends. You sitting in front of it, the piece of art itself, its texture, it seems like the colors are like expressing something else. And it made me, why am I saying this? Because I was thinking of the mechanism of like vibrating chords. It can be uh oh it can be like a constant recreation, or it can be just like art and life and creation, um made once and then recreated and re-witnessed again until its death or its disappearance. Or I think it's a matter of I think it's something involved with the action, what I'm trying to say, like the difference from the idea of recreation every second. I think it's something to do with starting point and an end point. Yeah. If any of it makes sense.
No, I mean, a few thoughts come to mind. The other thing I was thinking about also was the idea of, like, um, repetition being, like, boring or mundane. Um, I mean, this kind of the thought that came to me was that, like, he's the one that Allah is Mu'id. He's the one that will return us all. He's the one that has this kind of originating or restarting of life in every moment. And I think that sort of, for me, when I think about that, like, what's the benefit in that? Um, I mentioned, the idea of perception being limited. I think that's one kind of intellectual take. But I think the other kind of more simple take, maybe Mara, that's what you were kind of alluding to, is just the idea that, like, we often take for granted, the moments of life that are given to us because they are repetitive, right? Because every day is the same. Every day the sun gets up. Every day we have to feed ourselves, and go about our days to survive and thrive. And that can become, I always say that routine, excuse me, routine can become a prison. So I think these names often, and the idea of God recreating everything in every moment, it kind of gives me the sense of, like, hey, don't take this for granted, right? Because it's fresh. It's not stale. It's not, boring and mundane and like it was yesterday. Every single moment that you get, every breath that you get is unique. It's special. And, that's something to pay attention to. That's kind of what I got. That's kind of along the lines of what I was thinking of just now.
Yeah, and also I think, you grounded it really nicely because it was honestly chaos in my head. And thank you for grounding it. Examples are good for.
Yeah. No. I mean, I think you started with the idea of, like, art, right? That's every time you go back to a poem. I mean, as a writer, that every time I go back to something that I wrote, I have to tweak it, I have to revise it in some way because I reinvent it, or I reinvent myself, or I reimagine, the moment that I was in. And I think that's kind of where you were coming from. But, no need to restrict that just to our own works or, art. Every life is, is every moment that, is like that, right?
Yeah, but I was thinking. So what I was thinking is that maybe Allah is recreating it through our perception. So what you said is, this is another morning. I shouldn't take it for granted, and He has recreated it for us, like another day, another morning, another moment in life. But it's our perception. He speaks, He shows it to us through our perception. In the same way, sometimes we receive His guidance through our hearts. But I was thinking at the same time, if we set our perception aside, we are basically, I don't know, I think it's the worst time ever in humanity to compare us with machines, but just for the sake of like the system and how we are born, like with the body and everything that's working, we are somehow, there's a mechanical quality to the way we live life, in the sense that we wake up, we sleep, our bodies move through our sleep so we don't die, etc., etc. But it is he recreates reality through our perception. If our perception would be set aside, we would only be machines. Life would still be, but it wouldn't be witnessed. I think it's something like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit abstract, but something I've been thinking about a little bit in my writing is that, like, differentiation is that's just a habit of our minds, right? Like, there's nothing in reality or in the universe that kind of necessarily, everything is connected in some way. It's only our minds that kind of divide things up, kind of just, a very abstract kind of an intellectual way of thinking about perception. The other thing that that came to mind when you were talking was, we're talking about repetition and returning, and how God creates, every single moment. And I think you mentioned the word heart, right? And I think the heart is like, one of the best examples of that, right? It's just constantly going, right? Just it is repetition, right? The heart is just every moment it's just doing the same thing, right? It's the motor of our lives, and it's just constantly repeating rhythm, over and over again. And it's Allah that does that, right? It's God that gives us life. He makes our hearts beat. Um,
Yeah, but that's from a mechanical point of view, because it's also our hearts, the same hearts that pump every second, every minute. Yeah, that like guide us to like listen for the Quran, or like witness the chirping of the birds. It's also like the same instrument. It's like it runs, but it also speaks and invites and um, sends waves and heats, and we feel the heat, but it doesn't actually heat. It's our perception that I hope I didn't lose Maham because of that. You know what I'm saying? Like it has like a double agent.
double agent. What
Yeah,
what does?
the heart, like
Oh,
this
yeah,
example,
yeah, yeah.
because it pumps like from a mechanical point of view, it pumps blood and keeps us alive, but at the same time, it also encourages us to connect with our creator, and it's
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's one of the fundamental driving motivations of this work in these sessions is that we don't just perceive things logically. We perceive things from three different channels, really. Like one being our heart, the other being our mind, and then the other being our bodies. And so all of those are kind of interconnected in different ways, but we can't neglect one and just use and only focus on one means or one channel of understanding.
I had something to add.
Please.
Yeah, so like just this idea of like recreation and what you said about like monotony, right? Because if you think about it, especially as adults, like our lives are pretty monotonous. Like a lot of things repeat. Unless you're just like, I don't know, a crazy adrenaline junkie or something, just doing mad new things every single day.
Right.
We have to like go through a lot of things that are repetitive. But this is just like this imagery of like, I think it's called a flip book, right? Like a book in which like you can draw and then like flip the pages, and
Yeah.
it looks like, I don't know, if you draw an image, it looks like it's running. So that's what it's like. Like it's not that the image or is running, like the thing, the object, or not the object, the subject, whatever, is running, but it's just that it's a brand new image. Like it's a whole new frame. It just looks to us like it's running because the images are so similar to each other. They're similar enough to each other to make it look like it's the same image, but they are different from each other, different enough to give the illusion of movement, motion, and change. But in reality, there's no change. There's just I mean, there's no like flow. It's just like a complete abrupt end and then restart altogether. Like that's what it is. And like when I realized that, and I like really felt it, like I felt the truth of it in my perception. I remember I was just like driving, just like down the road, or just even like sitting like in my kitchen, like I am right now, and just looking at the walls and being like, before, like I'd be like, oh my gosh, like I've been in this house forever. But then I'm like, oh my God, the entire universe was annihilated and recreated. And look at the walls, like they're still the same. Like that's actually crazy, you know? Like that's not monotonous. Like that's not normal. That's not like something to just be casual about. That's something to be in awe of, like the creation of Allah. Like we think only when we're seeing, like, I don't know, a flower blooming or a butterfly fluttering, like that's to be in awe of the creation of Allah. But no, this is also awe-inducing. Like if you see it like that. And what Mara said about art reminding me of like, I don't know, it just gave me this really like new look at the word, sorry, perception of the word, the name of the word ma'ad. Um, when I like, so it says, uh, La radduka ila ma'ad, he will return you to ma'ad, and it just gave me this like sense of like that could mean portal. Like what you said about art, right? So like I remember once I wrote a poem, like my first ever poem that I channeled, and I recited it at like this online like gathering, right? And this one lady, she texted me afterwards and she said, I felt like he was skipping in a garden and picking and God was like showering flowers, or like flowers were being showered on you when you were gathering them and like weaving them into the poem. And I was like, oh my God, subhanAllah, that is literally how I felt while I was writing the poem. And it was just insane to me that this woman would like feel, who I'd never met, by the way, right? In the physical world. The fact that she would like tune into that just by listening to just quote unquote just. I have to apologize to the words for saying just by listening to words. But yeah, words are portals. Like they give you that access to, or just not just words, right, but art specifically. I guess when I read my poems that I've read, written in a particular state, I like that's a mad for me. That's a returning to that state that I wasn't even in outside of having written that poem. But I need that. It's like I need the poem to get back into that state sometimes, and that poem necessarily almost takes me to that state. But then that poem also takes others to that state. So it's like it's not just a portal for me. And like this has happened like more than once to me that people will be like, oh, I felt like you were, just giving a very specific imagery, right? Like that, which no one else would have known, except that they did know because apparently it's a portal. And so like it's like people hear it, or I guess see the art, and they can access the state that you were in, that the artist was in. And so then it's like a ma'ad, it's like a place of return. And I don't know, like I feel like that's really beautiful from, I don't know, just for me as someone who's like obsessed with the past, just like nostalgia. It's just like cool that you can go back, because we feel like we can't go back, right? To so many things, like it feels like we can't go back, like to our childhood or like to wherever. But just the saying, La radduka ila ma'ad, like God can take you back to the place of going back. It just evokes like the imagery of a portal to me, like, oh, there's this door that's open, you can always go back, or like God can always take you back.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Reminds me of my old poetry days. I really like the parallel between word and world. Right, you just take out one letter, and that's the only difference, right? Is that L sound. Word and world. Words are worlds in a way. Yeah, words are portals. The sound, the similarity between ma'ad and mu'id is also kind of interesting too. It's a good example of what we were talking about a little bit ago about how morphology, different morphological patterns and vowel patterns kind of hint at different abstract levels of abstraction. So ma'ad is like you said, meeting or a place, right? But it's also, especially in colloquial Arabic, it's used to just mean an appointment, right? A time, right? A time that like a preordained time, or a a set time, right? So like you would say, I have a ma'ad, right? It just means I have an appointment, right? So ma'ad, mu'id, right? Very close. And this sort of, I think is a cool way to kind of introduce some of the ideas in my research, or in the theory of the language that I'm trying to develop. In that, like I said, we perceive reality in 3 dimensions, right? Through the heart, mind, and body. So when we talk about the heart, really that's about like attention, right? It's about like that part of perception that happens before thought. And that's sort of captured to me in the alif sound, right? It's the most neutral sound. It's the most simple sound. And then you have the e and u sounds, which kind of denote different directions moving from that a sound, right? So if the a sound is like pre-linguistic or pre-thought, just attention, the e sound, right, that higher frequency sound, is more about abstraction. Is more abstract. In Arabic, often we find it being associated with actually the idea of possession and ownership. And then the u sound is more kind of physical, right? It's more related to the body. And you can kind of see that in ma'ad and mu'id, right? So ma'ad is the time, right? And we all have a ma'ad. We all have that appointed time, right? So kind of, to me, that a sound in Arabic often has that sense of like attention. It also has a sense of like duality and reciprocity as well. But the e sound, mu'id, right, is usually kind of denoting some sort of level of abstraction, right? At this point, we've gone past attention, and we're in like the realm of like abstraction and logic and thinking and association and possession and ownership, and that kind of thing. So just a little kind of small segue into that sort of like
Sorry, I have a
sound theory.
question.
Yeah.
I'm a bit confused. Is it not? I mean, I feel like, as if I don't know. I don't know anything, but I'm just asking you. But I feel like, wouldn't Ma'ad be the place of like returning, and wouldn't Maw'id be the time? Or like, like I say, appointment is like Maw'id, right? No, Ma'ad.
Um, I think they're interchangeable. Maw'id is definitely less common. Maw'id is like maf'il form.
It's pretty common, like where yeah, like if you want to ask, like I've been having to take ruqya appointments, so the sheikh is always like, you need a maw'id. It's like you need an appointment.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that actually reminded me, it says of something in the Quran, the word maw'id, and it's very Jalali. Obviously, it's again with linked to this name, but it's about the people of Lut alayhi salam, and like when Allah said that not Allah, sorry, I think the angels told him that they're going to be destroyed, basically. Um, إِنَّ مَوْعِدُهُمُ الصُّبْحُ أَلَيْسَ الصُّبْحُ بِقَرِيبٍ. Their appointed time is the morning, and is not the morning near. Oof, it gives me goosebumps. It's just terrifying. But yeah, like that's an example of maw'id, where it's like a time that is set, appointed time. But yeah, like how's that? It's like a date, right? Like re-
Oh, so
how does
actually,
that have to do with
so
returning?
okay, yeah. So actually, it's a little confusing because the sounds are very close, and in my opinion, my perspective might be a little bit controversial to like traditional views, but that's a different route. According to the traditional, that would be wa'ad, right? Maw'id, right? So the wow is before the ain. Maw'id, you can hear it,
Right.
right?
Yeah, okay,
So
no, that makes sense. Because
yeah,
it's like you agreed to, um, what's it called? Like, oh, like we're agreeing, like we promise
right. The promised
that this is.
time.
No, I definitely agree with that. So in Khaliji, we have a saying, and like that was in the 2022 FIFA World Cup was in Qatar. So we had this like the slogan, I guess, right? For the yeah, the slogan with all the flags. In English, it was the time. I think the time is now. I think that was but in Arabic, it said al wa'd, which means as promised. But yeah, I think that's like a
Yeah, yeah. I
Khaliji
mean,
saying,
but
al wa'd.
yeah, but in my opinion, like I mean, we can take a look here. If we put in, wad, and then look at the anagrams here, maybe there's something. Maybe there's another one that I'm forgetting. But yeah, I think the idea of promise being at some cognitive level tied to returning is very, very interesting to me. Let's see here. Switch it to tables a little bit easier. So wad, yeah, promise. Wada. Oh yeah. So wada actually, wada means to like say farewell, I think, or to bid farewell. Yeah, wadahu. I guess it also has some other meanings of like peace and calm. Aud is the root that we were looking at, which is the idea of returning. Adu is enemy. So this looks like it's a full. Oh no, it's 5. It's -1. So there's 5 permutations or 5 combinations here, and then the last one is Dao, which is, we all know, the invitation or calling or supplication. So all of those are pretty similar, I think, in a lot of ways. I think they're all related in lots of different ways, right? Just to go through it again, wa'd, generally promise. Wada, I guess maybe the general idea here is not farewell. Maybe there's more to it, but one of the ideas is farewell. Aud is returning. Adu is enemy, and Dao is invitation. So yeah, it's in the same sense that we say these semantic fields carry all these points of information, right? In the same way that we say like one of these roots this is one semantic field, right? This little blooming of red dots is one semantic field. That's one level of cognition. But if we just combine, right? If we just take all of the sounds, or take 3 sounds and put them in any order, this is also another level of abstraction as well. So like, if a root holds one idea that's differentiated by perception in different kind of ways, the sounds themselves, these 5 sounds all together in some kind of orderless and timeless fashion are all also one idea as well, at some level beyond human, at least conscious human understanding. Yeah. So we covered a lot. We didn't talk too much about the root for al-bari, which we kind of touched, or Zinir touched on a little bit, in terms of like the senses that are in this root. Primary senses really being that of like innocence. So that's why this is one of those roots again, or one of those names again, that's I think really difficult or even impossible to translate, right? The only way to translate it is through a conversation like this, right? Because what does the originator, or my other preferred translation of the evolver, what does that have to do with innocence or purity, or so the base verb here is, or the base noun here is bari, and like I said, I think earlier, it can have the idea similar to jabbar, of recovering from disease or sickness, or that idea of returning to soundness, returning to health, returning to one's best form is kind of the idea here. That's also kind of why I like the idea of the evolver, right? Because humans do go through development. I mean, we have gone through development over time. Humans 200, 300 years ago aren't exactly the same as humans today. We go through development from infancy to adulthood as well, and it's not random. There's a structure to it, there's a pattern to it, and all those ideas are kind of tied into that for me. I think it's a bit intuitive. So like other words or other names that we've come across, it's pretty intuitive, right? The idea of like um, innocence being tied to your origin, right? Because like your origin, or how you were designed, is flawless, right? It's as we grow up and as we learn things improperly or don't learn things at all that we become kind of corrupted or um, stunted in some way in our growth. Um,
I really like that, like, especially in contrast to, like, I don't know if it's a biblical idea, but like the Christian idea of original sin. So this is like literally saying, actually, no, you're originally pure and innocent. And that's how, and not just like you or like us as human beings, but like Bari'a, right? Like all of creation is originally pure and innocent.
right.
That's just how God created it. Like, that's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think one of the words here, I'm not sure if it's this root. It might be this root. Maybe I'll see it.
If you had to add something, what you said, I definitely think it's better to think that you are born pure. So in my culture, there's always like every time sometimes like when something bad happens, like there's this argument that, yeah, well, I mean, we were born with the original sin, so and it makes you feel like you did something without your
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point.
Yeah, and it's almost like unfair, right? Like it feels really unfair that means you didn't do anything. Then like, but you're like being held accountable for it. Whereas with this, I feel like it just ties, I don't know, it just reminds me of like the Wa'd. Yeah, ألست بربكم قالوا بلى شهدنا. It's like, actually, no, originally we're pure because before we came into this realm, Allah asked us, am I not your Lord? And we said, yes, Lord, we testify. So it's like, oh, actually, originally I'm pure, but like, it's like I don't know, there's something really gross about, even though we sin and even though we do these things, like, there's something really gross and like, I don't know, like humiliating about being made to feel like, or even not by others, like even just by like, I guess the ideology, or the cosmology, like being made to feel like it's because there's something inherently wrong with you. But like this name is saying actually inherently you're pure and innocent. This is like your inherent original state. And anything else, like, and even like with bad, it's there's for me it's like I think it said in the English one, like absolve, to like, oh, by like God can remove whatever that, I guess, dirt or sin, or like God can cleanse you of that because He's about it and He created you originally pure, so you can be absolved. And that's like, I guess, what Surah At-Tawbah like begins with bara'atu min Allah,
Yeah.
like there's a way to like absolve, like God can give you this um removal or like purification, acquittal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the only surahs, I mean, that is the only surah in the Quran that does not begin with the mercy of Allah in a sense. It doesn't have the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in the beginning. And the context is like, I think after a conquest of Mecca, when the polytheists had a certain period of time, to decide what they wanted to do, if they wanted to stay, if they wanted to become Muslim, if they wanted to leave. So Bara'a there means like, you're free and clear for the time being, right? You're free from obligations, in a sense.
Sorry, did you notice your note taker just left?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
What?
I think he was done. No, it literally said like the note taker left.
That's so weird. Why did it leave?
He discovered free will, I guess.
That's really strange. Maybe it exceeded the time or something like that. I don't know. It's a trial service that I tried. So we'll see. I guess, I don't know. Trying to check here. Sorry.
Can you click on Tabara, not tabarakna. It's right under bari.
Tabara'na. Yeah, generally it means like um, declared ourselves innocent or free. That's another idea I came to mind a little bit, is that, we often talk about the idea of like union and separation as being kind of like a fundamental concept in language, in cognition, and you can kind of reduce all meaning to those two frames often. And this is one of those Jamali names, I think, right? One of the names that kind of highlights the beauty of Allah, but it does so with the sense of separation, right? Like that's one of the fundamental ideas here, is separation, right? Um, that's kind of why it's really hard to translate. Like evolver doesn't really capture that idea. Originator maybe a little bit more, right? Because you're bringing something back to its origins, separating it from anything it might have been corrupted with. So maybe originator is the better translation here.
What you just said about separation, but this is like, it's a really, like, it's a good separation. Because I was thinking about like being separated from Shaitan, and it just reminded me of like how it says, "Ana bari'un minkum." I think that's something that Ibrahim alayhi salam said to his people, like, right? Like that I'm not like part of, well, not, I think he said, "Ana bari'un mimma ta'malun." Like I'm separating myself from your actions.
Yeah.
But it says, كمثل الشيطان إذ قال للإنسان اكفر فلما كفر قال إني بريء منك إني أخاف الله رب العالمين. So Shaitan, when he tells insan, disbelieve or do kufr. And then when he does kufr and when he disbelieves, he says, I'm innocent of you because I fear Allah, the Rabb al-Alameen. But yeah, this is also one of the separations that's like, it's a good separation. But I mean, not in sense of him, but it's just like, I guess it's just God reminding us that he's not gonna, like he's gonna misguide you and then he's gonna lead you to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, this root also, one of the words that comes from here is al-birriya, which is another word for humanity, or creation in general. It reminds me of bitter, actually. So if you take away one of the letters here, if you take away the last letter of this root, you just get bitter, which is often translated as like piety, or like, just being good to your parents is birrul walidain is a common phrase in the Quran, right? To show piety or show care or concern. So that's one of the ideas that's obviously related, I think, to like innocence and origins. Well, I think we covered a lot, mashallah. I don't know why our note taker left. I'll have to figure that out. But
He was done. He was done with everything.
Yeah, I guess maybe.
It was actually so funny because it literally said Omar's note taker left, and I was like, I did not know this bot had like free will to just leave.
Yeah, I don't understand either. Why? I mean, I guess maybe we just hit a time limit. I think it seemed to have left right at the 1:30 mark. So 90 minutes is a good place to stop, I guess. Alhamdulillah.
He went to take his shahada.
Or he went to reflect.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny.
Or he went to reflect.
Yeah, he said this is too deep.
Yeah, it's actually kind of this tool is kind of interesting. I'm trying a free trial, but it even does like some questions, right? So it'll like prompt you with some questions based on the transcript. So how can we cultivate a sense of awe and appreciation for the constant recreation and interconnectedness of reality, as reflected in Islamic teaching? It's kind of cool. What insights can we gain from studying the etymology? They're kind of basic, but I think when I was doing some of the other ones, some of the questions are actually kind of cool. So yeah, I'm excited about this transcript lab report thing. Inshallah, it's beneficial. Well, if there's no other thoughts, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you to everybody for joining, and thanks for the wonderful conversation and perspectives. As always, if you think of anything, or if you want to continue the conversation, which I think we will be doing for the next couple of sessions, because, like I said, those three names are all kind of related, and all are usually translated similarly as having something to do with creation. البارئ ال الخالق البارئ
Wait, sorry,
المصور.
I'm so sorry. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking, do you think this is a name that we can like embody? Like we said, in terms of like creativity, but like in terms of khaliq, it's not really something we can embody in terms of how many times am I saying in terms of in in the sense of creating from complete scratch. But Allah does say ahsanul khaliqeen, implying that there are multiple khaliqeen and that we create I think Allah even says that like يخلق ما يعمل, like He creates our actions, that what we do, our amal is also created by God. But yeah, like I'm wondering, I think Khaliq is something that we can embody or manifest as, like we can be a manifestation of it in terms of creativity. And I think Musawwir as well is something that we can do in terms of creating forms or shapes or specifically in embodying the names. But what do you think about Bari? Like, do you think it's something that we can embody? Because I feel like there's a sense of just creating from complete nothingness. I don't, maybe that's just my perception.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think what we said maybe last session or a couple sessions ago is that some names have qualities which, are, well, all the names have qualities which glorify God or magnify God in some way. Some of them can be applied to humans in a good way, and some of them wouldn't. They wouldn't apply to humans in a good way. So I don't think you can really apply this to humans. I think maybe you kind of can in a way. This name also reminds me of a common Arabic name, which is Bara, and it kind of just means like bari or innocent. So yeah, I think we can maybe kind of embody it in the sense that like we're innocent, like we commit sins more than we realize, right? We do things that are not great or not in our best form, and we are aware sometimes, and sometimes we're not aware, right? And so, sometimes we do good and we're aware, and we're not, and sometimes we do good and we're not aware. So in that sense, we're always, there's always kind of an innocence to us. I think that's one way of thinking of it. But I think it also doesn't apply in the sense that like we cannot create anything so original, right? Like, we kind of touched on this last week, is that like, humans are always subject to influence in some way, right? Like we cannot create from nothing. We can come pretty close. You might be inspired and come up with, a beautiful song or poem or piece of artwork that, no one has ever seen before, or nothing even close to it. But, still, most of the time, art just mimics life anyway, right? And we're just mimicking, the creation of the creator. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe some names are just kind of in between in that area there, in that sense of how they apply to humans.
Right. I also had like a sense that this is like, I don't know, something that we can't copy, I guess, or like embody. Like we can't تخلق بأخلاق الله in this specific name in terms of creation, only in terms of creation. Like we can be, of course, innocent and even like saying like, or like absolving yourself of responsibility. Like like Allah says, I think to Rasulullah to do, you don't take their sins upon yourself, like say, lakum a'malukum. That's like making yourself bari, right? But yeah, in terms of creation, I don't think we can.
Yeah, agreed. One more thing that kind of just came to mind. I guess we should be doing this more often. Is checking the Quran for instances of this name, and so it only appears once in the Quran in the standard form with the article on it. هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور, like we mentioned those three names in Surah Al-Hashr. But it does also appear twice in Surah Al-Baqarah in reference to the story of
Tubu
Moses.
ila bari'ikum, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
That I thought that was
Tubu.
really interesting. It's
Yeah, it is.
like I feel like all names don't have that. Like it doesn't say mu'minukum, for example, but it says bari'ukum. Like, what do
Yeah.
you think of that?
I don't know. It's also curious that it's that name is the only time that that name is mentioned in. There's only one context where that name is mentioned, and that's in the context of Musa and his and his people, the Jews, obviously. So that's interesting. I never. I mean, I've always wondered why, in memorizing or reciting those ayahs in the Quran. I always wondered like why is that. It's also kind of one of those jarring ayahs because it says uh, I think it says like
Oh, I think it says kill
yeah,
yourselves,
kill you. Like I
right?
mean, yeah, it sound that's what it sounds like, right? Faqtulu anfusakum. And that's kind of
Yeah.
how it's translated. Um, and I don't know the context exactly, but I think the idea was that like there were certain people in the tribe or in the community that were going against Moses or going against God or something like that, and God was ordering them to fight them, not to just let them kind of do. Um, but yeah, that's the context where um, God says this is better for you. Fight them or kill them or however you want to translate it. This is better for you to your bere, to your the name that we've been discussing, to your creator, your originator. So it's curious. I'll have to do some research. I didn't think of this until I just saw it right now, but yeah, it's curious why Allah uses that name there in that specific context of Moses and the Jews. It could be kind of related to like, yeah, just the one thing that kind of just comes to mind is that the Jews proclaim themselves as the chosen people. Well, I mean, they were the chosen people, right? But they're very proud of that, right? Of that fact, right? And they almost had this attitude, in the scriptures. I mean, definitely in the Quran, but like, I think it's even in Christian tradition of just like innocence, right? Like we can't do no wrong because we're the chosen people. So maybe that's the connection there. I'm not sure. I'll have to check
Yeah,
my
no,
sources.
that's definitely something that resonates. But I was also thinking to link it also to Mu'ayyid and like returning. But I think Maham talked about like tawbah and forgiveness. But it's saying here, tubu ila bari'ikum, like the verb or like the act or the command, the amr is tubu, right? So like, what's the point of tawbah? It is to become pure, to become innocent of what you did.
Right.
So I guess that's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it also has the sense of tawbah. Tub also has the sense of return, right? And like we said with Mu'eid, uh, that's a common idea in Mu'eid, but also within Barit, right? Returning to origin, returning to uh, innocence is kind of maybe a connection there as well.
I feel like, do you think, I don't know, like this just opened up something for me because I'm just realizing that like I don't know, this ayah has been coming up for me as well, like tubu ila bari'ikum, and I just heard that and I was like, oh my God, that's a very specific usage of a name outside of like, for example, I guess ilah and Rabb. I don't know of any other name that where Allah says like kum, like like Rabbikum, who like Ilahukum, or like Ilahu, Rabbi Musa, Rabbi Harun,
Oh,
right?
that's a really good question.
And it's like Bari'ikum, but there's no like I'm a Khaliqikum also, obviously. But it's not like Salamkum or like Rahmankum, like Rahimkum. Like that's not a thing.
Right, right, yeah. Yeah.
So like why Bari'ikum? And like which ones are in that formation. I guess there's other like Allah latifun bi'ibadihi, but still it's not like and like Allah ra'ufun bil ibad, right?
Yeah.
But still like there's a preposition in between.
No.
Whereas this is just like, oh, your creator, your body. It's like much more intimate, like your ilah
Yeah. No, those I love
or
those kind of
Rabb.
questions because those kind of questions are questions that we can answer now with technology, it's a little tricky, right? So like I would have to kind of try and find names of God in the Quran that have that possessive morpheme on there at the end. But that's something that you could not do, 10 years ago, unless you had a genius scholar who memorized the Quran, right? Not even just someone who memorized the Quran, but like a genius, that could be like,
Yeah, like
that,
computational memory, I
right?
guess.
Yeah, that you could just ask him, hey, where does this
Mhm.
word, and that there's only been a handful of people that throughout the history of Islam that could do that, but now we have computers that can do it. So I mean, it's still a little tricky. You still have to kind of, program it in a way. So I will try and see if we can find some more interesting cases of names of God being used that way in the Quran. Interesting.
Wow, we've been going for 2 hours, so I guess that's
Yeah.
the haq of the
Mashallah.
2 names. And
Yeah.
also, Mara, I hope you had a good Eid since you said this is the exact way that you wanted to celebrate it. I hope it
Yes,
was worth it.
Yeah.
Jazakallah khair, thank you. That was my aid actually.
Yeah. No.
The class.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Yeah, I was just telling Mona in the beginning that yeah, at least with Arabs, the this Eid is usually not as festive as the other Eid. So yeah, no, happy to spend.
I don't know. It depends on where you live, because
Yeah,
like I just like there's a lot of like slaughtering and like
yeah, probably in Arab
distributing
countries it's
slaughter
different.
meat and all of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But khair, inshallah. Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, we get a cool lab report out of this session. And again, Jazakallah khair, thank you for your thoughts and perspectives. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going. And talk to everybody soon, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair again.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
And
assalam.
Eid
Eid Mubarak. Eid Mubarak.